Okay, welcome everybody to the TCP Building Design Committee. It's 5:34, so I'll call the meeting to order, but first I will read a few opening remarks. In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast over the Lunenburg Public Access Channel. The town of Lunenburg, in response to the COVID-19 coronavirus, is currently following the guidance from the Lunenburg Board of Health, Massachusetts Department of Public Health, and the CDC regarding the virus and steps communities can take to prevent the spread. And all town facilities are currently open by appointment to the public. In accordance with the governor's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, all public meetings are being conducted remotely. This meeting will be recorded and be able to be found on the Lunenburg Access YouTube channel within 24 hours after the meeting. The following information is also provided for members of the public that would like to participate in the meeting remotely. To participate remotely from a computer, please use the link that was included on the published meeting agenda, or from a telephone, dial the toll-free number 888-475-4499 and enter the webinar ID 865-3179-3661 and then the pound sign. The agenda lists all the topics which may be discussed at the meeting and are those reasonably anticipated by the chair. Votes may be taken as a result of these discussions. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may also be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by open meeting law. With that, I will open it up to any public comments from the public. I don't see any unless we have any from Heather and I don't see anybody waiting to get in. So I think we will go to public comments from the committee members. Okay, we have hands raised. I'm sorry. You guys are being good. I'll call on Dave Passios.
Oops, sorry about that. You took it down. Yeah, Dave Passios, member of the committee and resident of 56 Whiting Street. I have calmed down a bit since last evening, but I have to say that I was very disturbed with a committee report that was presented to a committee from a member of this committee. In its content, I believe that the comments made delves into far more than this committee has made decisions on. And tonight's meeting was called to sort out how we want to bring this proposal forward to the Board of Selectmen. Personal comments like, I'm not attached to brick and mortar, are personal comments. They're not comments from the committee. And in a committee report, the comments should be coming either a synopsis of where we're at as a committee or something that was asked to be brought forward by the committee. Much more appropriate if it had been brought forward as a public comment outside of that responsibility as representing the committee. And as I say, I'm very disturbed that some of the information that was discussed and then a back and forth after that also without an agenda item was inappropriate. Thank you.
Okay, Dave. Michael Ray, your hand was up. I'll recognize you.
Thank you. And I appreciate your comments about the committee report last night, Mr. Passios. So, I think that in hindsight, I think that the committee report section did not go as well as it should have gone. I think that there was a critical piece of the, there was a communication sent over from Mr. Roy to Heather while Heather was on vacation. And so I think that there was a context coming into the meeting that there would be this awareness that we had, that this committee requested to meet with the select board next week. And we did not have that context. Understandably, mistakes happen, but I think that email was just missed. Again, Heather was on vacation last week. Not last week, the time that the email was sent. The committee reports for TCP are always contentious at the select board meetings, because I think, some members, one member in particular, is generally opposed to the idea of this land being used for the purpose that we're looking at. And so, they don't always go as well as they should go. I do think, while I don't recall saying something about brick and mortar, I do think that it's important to try to accurately say what we're talking about, while also making it clear that it's my opinion, my assessment of things, and that certainly was not my intention to represent something that was not accurate. But I do think that it bothered me as well, Mr. Passios, that the committee report did not go as well as I thought it should have gone. Again, I think it was some context there was missing. But I also wanted to comment, because on the Lunenburg Ledger, which is here for these meetings, and my comment is also to them, that I think that the articles that they've been producing about summarizing our meetings have been excellent. I think that they've really informed the community accurately on the progress of what we talk about, capturing, I think, the tone of our meetings as well as the substance of them. So I know that Lunenburg Ledger is here listening. So this is, I did relay this to Pam, but I do want to also relay this to the writer who sits in on these meetings, that you're doing an excellent job communicating to the town about the content here, and it is appreciated.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Anybody else? Okay. The only thing I will say, it's not really a public comment, but just to the four of us, I have a meeting at 7 that I have to get off. Does anybody else have any constraints this evening? No. Okay. So I don't anticipate needing to have a long drawn out meeting here. Anyway, but we'll see how it goes. So first agenda item, which is sort of just a takeoff of an agenda item that I have on there most days, is just to sort of a placeholder to review any updated plans or cost estimate information from the architect. I will use this as an opportunity to update the committee that after our meeting, I did send an email to the design team asking them the questions that we had developed at our last meeting. And truthfully, that email went to them last week, not right away. And so we have not had that closed that loop. Heather and I have scheduled a phone call with them for tomorrow afternoon. They suggested that we perhaps talk through some of the stuff on the phone, just to I think so they can have a better handle for where we're coming from. So I will. That's to be that process is still ongoing with the design team. They haven't produced any new information that I know of that we need to review. So I think we're still in the same mode as we were last 2 weeks ago. I did also reach out to the DPW director, to Mr. Oliva, because one of the suggestions that the designers had was to ask if there was any opportunity to have the DPW's participation in any component of the project. Mr. Oliva's general comment was, probably not. There's not a lot. They're certainly not set up to do site work. About the only thing that they could think that he could think of, and he had to put some more thought in and I think talk it through with Heather, is perhaps there's an opportunity to do some of the paving or all of the paving on the project. but he needed to circle back on that. I haven't heard an answer. I know I'm not certain how fast he'll get an answer on that. That discussion, I took it that it relates a little bit to how the paving is funded, where the funds come from, and what can be used for different things. And so, you know, he needed to get back to me on that. But I wanted to just update the committee that I did have that discussion as we had discussed at the last meeting. Other than that, you know, we'll have more to report after I assume we'll have more to report after we talk with the design team tomorrow. So at our next upcoming meeting.
Greg, just a quick
I don't wanna move
comment.
on. Yep, go ahead.
Just a quick comment on the paving. You know, no matter who does it, if DPW felt they were able to take it on, it's still going to be contracted out work. So, you know, we're going to pay from one end or the other.
It comes out of town money. It just comes out of a different bucket.
Correct.
Yeah, I recognize that.
Yep.
So, but be that as it may, I posed the question. So, you know, Rob said, Rob Oliver said that, you know, if it was Gardner, we probably would step up and do all the site work. You know, so we're just not, we're not quite the operation that they are in Gardner. So here in Lunenburg, so we don't have the resources to do it, you know, to do the site work package. I will say I did kind of review the cost. I think we got a $1.3 million site package. I can't remember specifically. I don't have it right in front of me, but I did, you know, he asked me what the cost estimates are coming in as, and I told him what they were. And, you know, his general feel on that was that it might be a little high. That's my general feeling too. I mean, I realize we're dealing with a climate right now that's pretty hot from a construction market standpoint. Material prices are definitely getting higher. Oil is still low, but is rising, and that impacts paving prices. So, you know, but one of the things I asked the designers on was some more backup on that, as we discussed at our last meeting, in addition to the electric, some of the other things that we asked for backup on, and sort of a justification for costs where the HVAC system electrical subcategories. So we'll wait to see if there's any pencil sharpening that they were able to do on that. So any other comments, questions on this?
Yeah, going forward, as I said, as far as I'm concerned, this committee has not really decided the path forward. Yes, we are keenly aware that we need to bring something to the board, select board, and that will be next Tuesday. But as I said in the meeting, the previous meeting, I re-listened to the entire tape last night, and I made the comment that although I will not support something that doesn't make sense for the town, I wasn't then, and I'm still not ready to throw in the hat on what we've been pursuing for the last year plus. I think we need to be allowed to drill this project and proposal down as far as we can, and then take into consideration, as one or two members mentioned in the previous couple of meetings, in that we've done a pretty darn good job of accommodating a lot more people than we were originally thinking we were going to be accommodating, and that has a cost to it. And, you know, we've got not every inch of this building, but most of it occupied if this project goes forward. The numbers for demolition and a new building, although needing to be explored, I don't think you can afford to go too deeply into that unless we scrap the idea that we've been working on for a year. So at some point here, I may be proposing that one of the options that we bring to the Board of Selectmen is that we feel we need more time to drill down this project as we've been in its form that we've been working on, and bring some type of a report to town meeting and or an article to get a little bit more funding for design work or whatever we want to call it, with the intent of a full proposal with funding options brought to the town meeting in the fall. That's one scenario that if the Board of Selectmen were on board with it, that's one of the paths forward that we could take. I personally don't want to be involved or have our scope expanded to become a building reuse committee. That's not what I signed on for, and I don't think it's going to help move anything forward. That's my position right at the moment.
Michael Ray.
Yeah, so on this topic, so, Mr. Passes did reference the committee report I provided last night. So to go in a little bit more in depth in that, so when, normally I give these committee reports in there, there's always a couple of questions, but last night there were several questions. And I think part of it was because, again, we were missing some context, but a couple of things were said that I think are pretty relevant. So one of them was that we're out of money to continue working with the architects. So, no matter what path forward we want to go in, we need to ask for more money. So that, the second thing was, I did mention last night that we had a rough estimate for tearing down the building that was close to or around the same of the estimate that we have for constructing this building. And that we don't have, because our scope is not to look into tearing down the building and building a brand new town hall, that we don't have a lot of detailed numbers in that area. But I think that there is interest in learning more about, from the select board, what I heard last night, that there's interest in learning more about what we need to be able to move forward. Our scope talks about the land, the building and the land, not building or land, or there's no and or there. So I think that we may need to request to revise our scope to be an and or, because I think that we may find ourselves with two different products at the end of this, where you have one product that is how to reuse the existing building, and a second product being if we were to build this thing from scratch and find the same uses that we're tasked to look into, what that would look like. And that may be the best approach. Now, I also had the occasion to listen to the Architectural Preservation District meeting recently, and the select board met with them to talk about the old primary school. Separate project, separate issue. But what came about in that conversation was that the APD, the members, all of them, I would say as a whole, are very much so beholden to their charge. They are not in favor of demolishing, of tearing down any building that falls within the district. And I'm saying that generally. Following up with their meeting, that is what their last meeting at the end of last month was about, how to move forward with the old primary lot. We also have to think about the age of the TC Passios, as we're only about 5 years away from this falling underneath those bylaws. And then, whatever we do, whatever vision we have, I think that we need to go forward with the mindset that if we do not tear this building down, that we will need to preserve a significant amount of the envelope, and that's going to be the perspective from APD. So I think that we need, as we go forward, like I said, I think that we need to have we may need to have two different products.
Okay, I appreciate that. Both of those narratives.
Well, that kind of follows along with, excuse me, what I was saying at the last meeting when we started talking about a tear down option. I can't imagine where they come up with the numbers, but it must be in kind. So basically tearing it down and building up what's there now. But if that was the case, I don't think the most beneficial option would be to rebuild exactly what is there now.
Sure.
Which is a totally separate product, and it's very much different than anything that we've talked about, or that this group has talked about since before I was part of it. In more than a month and a half, maybe. I think it was about a month and a half ago that, well, when the numbers came out and they said, well, the tear down is about the same. That's when that opened everybody's eyes to, wow, maybe we should tear it down. But if it turns into a tear down rather than a modify, then that opens up a whole nother can of worms with site layout and development and uses and spaces, and it would likely be more economical to build multiple stories. I mean, that's just another thing to think about when we start to consider moving away from modifying and towards tearing down. So
Yeah.
considerably larger scope.
Yeah.
Matt, quick question for you, and you may not be as familiar with it as the APDC is, and I'm definitely not. And I only ask this for context. That property is within the district.
The village center district.
Is it village center, or is it within the historical district?
They're pretty much the same.
Okay. Do you know what the limitations are for building heights within that district?
I'm pretty sure it's 35 feet in general, but I don't know if we modified that to be a larger number for the village center districts. I'm thinking we may have, but possibly only for the campus development option, which was a larger scale, which I think this would qualify for.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. I just don't want us to go down that rabbit hole and come out the other end and then realize that, we're outside of that particular regulation. It's just something that.
And along that same line, I mean, a new building, you would most likely be desirous to have a basement. I mean, it makes maintenance and care of all the utilities and everything much easier if you don't have to dig up concrete and dirt to get to it.
Just one word of warning on that. Every school building that we have put down into the ground has had sump pumps running 24 hours a day to keep the water out of them. That property has a river running underground that used to be on the surface. Just a comment.
Very good.
I'm sure you could do a basement if it was engineered properly and it would be dry, but
yeah, they call it a boat.
Yeah, I've dug a test pit. I've dug test pits in the land between Kids Kingdom and TCP, and one of the test holes was down at the level of the parking of the of level of TCP, right? Where that walkway goes back, and yeah, it's to say the groundwater's high is an understatement. It's pretty.
Yep.
It's pretty high. I have my bylaw here, but I couldn't put my hands on the height requirement really quick.
Yeah.
But anyway,
I mean,
Matt has that one. Matt has that bylaw. Matt knows that bylaw better than I do.
Yeah. I mean, that's a question for down the road if we go in that direction. It just,
Yeah.
I throw things out when I think of them because I won't later on.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but I think the main part of this this discussion was I think to talk about our. So let me just say that in response to some of the things that were said and tonight about what happened, about the discussion that ensued last night at the select board, is that I didn't have an opportunity to view it. I walked in the door to my house at about 9 o'clock after finishing up a meeting in Stowe, and my wife had been watching it, so she gave me a little bit of a summary. And I did correspond with Michael Ray to say that I had reached out to Heather and that I hadn't heard, but shame on me, and I'll say this in the public, for the public's benefit and Heather's benefit, shame on me for not following up because I knew she was on vacation and I had intended to do so. I just got, last week was a blur. So, but all that to say is we are, all that to say is just to preface the fact that that's all water under the bridge now, because we are indeed on for the select board meeting next week, Tuesday at 9 o'clock, at 7 o'clock, March 9th at 7 o'clock. Heather corresponded with Mr. Alonso today on that. So, one of the things I really wanted to discuss tonight was how to best use that time so we're not wasting our time or the select board's time. I think that one of the initial, at least my initial reason for corresponding with the select board and asking for the agenda time was to discuss these type of, was to kind of have a round table with these type of issues that that we've been discussing tonight. Both, I guess just generally I'd describe it as putting it into the larger content, the larger discussion, the context of the larger discussion in town. I mean, I agree, and I've always said that our scope on this committee is very small, limited. We were tasked with coming up with a cost for reusing the TCP building for the various uses, and I won't regurgitate it. So we weren't tasked with figuring out a cost for what it would cost to tear it down, and I'm not saying we shouldn't go that route, but I'm just saying that we've always wanted to, at least in my opinion, I've wanted to be real careful not to stray from our task. But be that as it may, I think we've all recognized that we certainly also do not want to be irresponsible. And so we've asked the questions, and I think correctly so, of our design team to provide us a reference point. And it's time now to go and sort of engage in a dialogue with, and I think appropriately with the select board, as they've commissioned our committee, and are the entity in town that makes the steering, help. They're the legislative body in town. So I think so I prepared an email, and again, I meant to get this to you on last Friday, so you have the weekend to digest it, and it just didn't happen. So I apologize. It was so late coming, but I did send that out earlier today, and I did hear back from a few folks. I'm interested to hear what you all think about that, and I am not easily offended. So if you think we should change it totally, I'm fine with it. Or if we should expand what it says, if we should use the time, ask them to use the time different. I'm happy to accommodate. So so I'm taking the agenda a little bit out of order just for the folks at home. We'll do the minutes and warrant article after this. So I'm on agenda, for those following, I'm on agenda item number 5. So I'm interested to hear what you guys think. I mean, I got some of your comments. I think, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, jumping off of your comment there a couple minutes ago, I would like to dump any reference to the other buildings. I think we need to go into this building, this meeting. And before I forget to mention it, there is a very good chance that we're going to have a quorum at that meeting, and I think we better post a joint meeting,
Yeah, that's a good call.
because there'll be a
Okay.
minimum of 3 of us there. If you're there, Michael Ray's there, and I will be there unless I'm dying. So there is a good potential that we'll have a quorum. I would like to concentrate more on what we see as our path forward from here. Um,
I mean,
the path that Michael Ray laid out a few minutes ago with the addition of pursuing numbers for the other option, I think is sort of the direction we should be asking the Board of Selectmen for. And obviously that is going to require more funding, because that is not part of the scope of the contract that the architects and engineers are under at the moment. I do believe, though, that we do have at least one more town meeting and or a special town meeting in the original contract.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll say this from the record. I mean, I know let's see what happens after my meeting tomorrow. I mean, I feel like asking for, some of this stuff we're not out of line and out of, some of this additional information, and I don't see it as huge ticket items either. So, I mean, I plan to kind of broach this with them a little bit tomorrow in our call if I have the opportunity.
Yeah, I'm sure that DeGiorgio's will let us know, or let Heather know, when we're coming to the end of what they feel is their task under the contract.
Yeah, and they have let us know that, Dave, just so that everybody's
Okay.
clear. So that's one of the, as Michael Ray said, that's one of the earlier suggested that we spent the design budget. We have, they've done, and there are a few things that they still owe us. They owe us the final documents, and they owe us a meeting at town, a presentation at town meeting, and a few things like that. But the bulk of their work is done, as far as they're concerned. But asking for backup and things, I don't think that's out of line in my personal opinion. So we'll see how that goes. But no, your point's taken.
Yep.
Anybody else? Michael Ray, go ahead. Sorry.
I'm sorry, Mr. Allison, I look like you were about to say something.
Oh,
No,
I thought people were done. I was just going to mention that Dave Blatt sent an email at 5:18 with a couple of comments.
yeah, I see that, and I also got one from Brian, so I'll go over those after. But I figured I'd take your comments.
So
Thank you.
I agree with Mr. Passios that we should remove the language that talks about finding the, being a part of the conversation on the use of those other 2 buildings. I think that maybe just a phrase in there should just maybe reflect the fact that it's our opinion that that passability may be tied to the future disposition of the buildings that would be vacant. But I don't think that we should take that responsibility on. I think that should strictly stay with the select board and let that stay in their purview.
I agree. I guess I didn't think through the tone of that sentence, so I'll rework it.
And then, the letter will come to the board prior to the meeting. So but we are going to have the discussion. A few things to note about the meeting next week is that Mr. Alonso will not be there. So I will be as vice chair chairing the meeting. I expect, I'm part of this committee, so I don't think I have a lot to contribute to that presentation, but I do want to, if I can just speak for a second about what I know is going to come up and things that we may want to address in this letter. I think that we may want to articulate that while we still drill down these numbers for this project, that, just make it clear that we have received rough estimates that indicate that a new build of the same footprint will be in the same ballpark, and then list our asks, that we're asking for additional funding for design money, that we're asking for our charge to be modified to include the word or and /or, and that I think we should decide this tonight, but that it may be prudent to develop two different products, one to preserve and one to build new.
Okay. Does anybody have any thoughts on that? Or are we all in agreement on that?
I'm in agreement with it. Yep. Sounds
Okay.
sounds to me that's where we need to be during that meeting.
I
Okay.
agree. I agree.
And I
that,
think
that will have to include an article, and I think the Board of Selectmen or the Select Board is already kind of keyed into that they want to see something on the warrant so that this at least gets discussed at town meeting.
yeah. Okay. Okay. So, thinking about this more, I mean, we want to put in the select board's packets what we're hoping to talk to them about and be accurate about that. So, but we're going to be there and we're going to, and the discussion's going to flow the way the discussion flows. But I do want to be sensitive. I want to make sure they know what so perhaps I'll just simplify this memo and do it more in a bullet point type format, more like an agenda, sub-agenda, more topical, just to keep it simple, because we're going to, again, be there to flush out the points that we want to talk through. If that makes sense, does that make sense?
Right, but at the same time, be on a common front that, this is the path that we see forward. And even if it's a Y path and they choose which one we go on,
Yeah, okay.
that's
Yeah,
fine.
we want to talk, okay, so I have remove language about the existing buildings or modify that to as you folks have discussed. I have articulate that we have received a rough order of magnitude cost for what a comparable facility if we were to tear down, build new would cost us as a comparative point.
Greg, can I interrupt you for just 1 second?
Yep. Go ahead.
On that comment right there, a couple of times it has been mentioned as the cost based on the same footprint. If you remember the footnotes under those numbers, that was not the same footprint. It talked
Yeah.
about multiple stories. I don't want to present that as it was figured as an exact replacement for the buildings that is there now. The square footage probably, yes, but not the exact building that's there now.
Yeah. They did assume a 2-story building, steel frame, but they actually also assumed that we'd be able to reduce the square footage, Dave, because with a new building, we'd be able to maximize efficiencies, whereas some of those efficiencies go away when you're stuck with a existing shell.
Mm-hmm.
So they can develop the building based on the actual program needs instead of having to fit a program into existing building. So,
Yep.
He did actually assume that we could likely be a little less than 50,000 square feet with a new building.
Yep.
And again, I want to say too, for anybody that is listening or will listen, that the cost estimate that we've received from the designers relative to a comparative analysis in a new building would cost if we were to demo and rebuild is a rough order of magnitude cost estimate that's intended for a sort of, this is about what it's going to cost. It's not based on a detailed, lengthy engineering or architectural analysis. It's based on per square foot costs of similar type facilities that they have exposure to in the bidding industry. So I just want to be clear to everybody that might be listening that that's what we're dealing with. But we could say that. I mean, your point is noted though, Dave, that.
Yep.
We want to tell them that we want to talk through additional funding for design.
Mhm.
That
Yeah,
may,
we need to do that, or we
we're at the,
more or
we
less
can't
stop
explore,
what we're
we can't
doing.
explore, right?
Right.
So I think I'll probably do these a little bit in different order, because I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the first thing we want to tell them is that we see that it may be advantageous to look at a comparative second track, which would be a tear down and rebuild, and then follow it up with, to do that, we would likely need, we will need we will need additional design funding to do that. And then, Michael Ray, can you flesh out what you meant by the and/or statement again? Can you just?
Yeah, so the current charge or article that was passed speaks of the building and the land. And I think that the modification that we should request is for that to change to and/or. And that gives us the ability to look at a new building.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yep.
Building and/or land. Okay.
Now, I mean, some members of the community and for sure, one member of the board very vocally, doesn't support this project being at this proximity to the schools. So I think that what we may want to try to be clear about is that I think it would be helpful just for our own benefit that as we go forward, respecting those views, that we try to develop the building and then figure out, obviously the parking and all those other stuff, because there may be an interest in this not actually happening at this property, and for this to happen at another parcel of land in town. So I think we just need to just be clear that that the process that we're doing, that it will identify based on the building what the property needs will also be. How much additional space do we need for parking, and how does that limit us? So that way we get a total footprint for this. If the town were to decide not to use the land, but to take that design and apply it at the old primary school.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I don't know if that needs to be in the letter, but
Yeah. I just think, yeah. Okay. But point taken. I mean, yeah, like I said, I'll some of this stuff will flush out in the course of the discussion and kind of see how it goes. I mean, we are at, we legitimately, we're interested in the select board's thoughts and guidance on this too. So I don't want to, we definitely, our committee has an opinion and that's right to give it, but I don't want to be too, I don't want to come in like we're too hyper focused. I think the spirit of it is kind of, collaborative. I want the spirit to be collaborative.
Yep.
Okay. Can I shoot this out to you guys sometime tomorrow to kind of take a quick look at it before I zip it in?
Yep.
Heather, when do you need this to go in the packets?
Thursday, typically. We have materials by Thursday before the meeting.
Okay. All right.
But if you
I'll
can't
get up early and draft
we'll
it.
give you some leeway.
Say that again?
I said, if you can't get it by then, we'll give you some leeway.
Okay. I'll do the best I can. Yeah. All right. I'll get it.
Greg,
I think I'm the
could
only one
we-
that really makes a fuss about things that aren't in there by Thursday. So,
Yeah. Greg, could we ask the town manager if there's anything we've discussed this evening that she'd like to comment on?
Oh.
I know,
Yes.
Heather, putting you on the
I
spot.
think you just did.
Yeah, obviously I was there for last night's conversation, and I missed the building committee's last meeting, so I wasn't part of that conversation with the updated cost and the revisions that would be made. But I think you're on the right track. Obviously, an appropriation is needed. I think we need to pin down an estimate from our architect for that number. sooner than later.
Yeah.
So we can start to talk to the finance committee about that as well.
Yeah, I'm hoping we can have that be a topic for tomorrow, Heather.
Just a point of information. Dave, did you mention how we discussed the debt scenario at the last finance committee meeting?
Oh, no, I haven't brought that up, and you're more qualified to bring that forward than I am.
So we asked our financial advisor to put together some debt scenarios for both the TCP building project using the $21 million, just as the figure that we had at the time. He used a 30-year projection, and simultaneously to do one for the Turkey Hill project with an escalator for when that project would be constructed around 2030. So his numbers for the Turkey Hill project will exceed what the school is anticipating. His number included like a 27.4 million in 2030, where the school anticipates it, given similar projects right now at a 50% MSBA reimbursement rate, to be 21 million around 2030. So, but even given that larger number, it fit our debt ratios in our financial policies for both projects. But that was looking at both at a 30-year term. He's going to do some revisions to show scenarios with a 20-year term as well, and change those estimates for the Turkey Hill project.
Heather, very quick question for you. Authorized borrowing does not affect anything in our debt ratios until it's actually borrowed. Is that correct?
It affects, say we go out to borrow, that authorized borrowing shows up.
Okay, but the reason I'm bringing this up is that there's some authorized borrowing that's going to be rescinded at the Springtown meeting. That does nothing for our capacity, correct?
Correct,
just-
because we
right.
didn't borrow the funds.
Right. Okay.
It
That's
It's
just
just authorized.
it
So-
preserves future capacity.
Correct.
Yeah.
Like, that's why we rescind those amounts. Because if we were to go out for further borrowing, it's going to look like we have authorized borrowing for that amount.
okay. Thank you.
If I may ask the town manager as well. So although you said it's going to fit within the debt limits, will there be a need for some kind of ballot vote to authorize the debt?
I would assume the answer would be yes for those projects.
Okay.
I believe, Heather, that was calculated in as exempt debt. So yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting though to hear that. Because I've had that rolling around in the back of my mind, how this project might play into the future Turkey Hill project, since Mr. Beardmore so articulately presented that issue. So that's helpful to hear that. Be that as it may, we still want to sharpen our pencils as much as we can here. But okay, well, that's good. All right, so I will, unless anybody has anything more to say on this, I'll circulate another draft of this early in the morning. If someone or as many of you as possible can put a few set of eyes on it before I send it to Heather, I would appreciate it. Okay.
I'm good.
Anybody else, anything on this topic? Okay. So, review and approve minutes. Brian, who, by the way, has I failed to mention this. Brian has a school committee meeting this evening, so was not able to attend, but he
Yep.
did circulate minutes. And bear with me for a second. He circulated minutes for the 1/13 for January 13th meeting. January 13th, 2021. Does anybody have any thoughts relative to these? If not, I'd accept the motion. Comments.
He deserves a merit badge for the 6 pages.
Yeah, man. Whew. Thank God for Brian. Seriously.
I move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All right. Roll call vote. Bellson.
Yeah, aye.
Dave Pagos.
Yes,
Ray Jeffers.
Aye.
And an aye from me.
just for the record, that was the minutes for January 13th, 2020.
Correct. January 13th, 2021.
Yep.
Don't have any others. So that is that for that item. And then I had on here a discussion of a warrant article. I think this is more, I think we feel we need our, and we don't, and it's likely going to be a thing article for some additional design costs. But I think that, and I know it's on the timetable closes a few days after our meeting next week with the select board, but hashing out week. Does anybody differently?
I think we definitely need to bring something to town meeting, an article in there to, and a lot of this is going to be determined by how our conversation ends up next Tuesday with the Board of Selectmen as to what path we're taking. And
agree.
I think they would support an article that includes additional funding. Something I've said many times in the past when we get to issues like this with the need for additional funding. Don't pin me right down to the dollar, but the middle high school cost of before we even got to the building stage, feasibility study, multiple feasibility studies. We spent $500,000 before we even started to design the building. People may not remember that, but that was over a very long period of time. We did a minimum of 2, and I believe 3, actually 3 feasibility studies. The first one was done in-house, but the other 2 we paid for. So, you know, it takes dollars to, excuse me, to properly investigate and bring a proposal of this size forward.
Yep, I agree. All right, so I just think it's going to be a topic of our discussion next week, and I think we need to come out of that meeting if we do nothing else. One of the things we need to come out of that meeting is with what we're doing, what we're requesting for the warrant article. And so whether it's more along the lines of an update or whether it's more along the lines of a funding article, I don't necessarily think we need both, because we could do an update in the same spirit as a funding article, but we'll determine which path we need. I agree, Dave. We'll determine which path we need to go after our discussion next week.
I think that there may need to be 3 articles
Okay.
recommended. One of them being article to present a report to the town to give them an update on where we're at. I do think that we should let them know formally, all the numbers that we're able to drill down for all this. And as well as our, and I think it helps explain the next two articles that we then will need to present. The first one being to change the charge, to add the and/or, and then the next one being the funding. I think the order of that matters, because if the and/or is denied, then there's no need for funding, because there's nothing to work on.
Okay, that's a good point.
So would you like for me to draft these three articles?
That'd be great.
All right.
You always want to be careful when you ask me if you want to, if you can do something, because I'll take your opinion.
Volunteers are never refused.
I'll draft.
That'd be terrific. That'd be terrific. Thank you for doing that.
All right.
Okay, I think you're, now that you so articulately said it that way, I think I agree with you. Okay, sounds good. Future meeting schedule. We will now have a meeting published for the 9th, which is next Tuesday, and we will have one for the 24th. We have one scheduled currently for the 24th as well.
I had it on my calendar as the 17th.
You're right,
Is that-
17th. You're right,
Okay.
17th, not the 24th.
Yep.
Do we want to just continue along the theme of Wednesdays and do the April 7th and April 21st as well?
That'll
Sure.
work.
Okay. Wednesdays seem like they're working. It's Conservation Commission tonight, which I'm probably going to be on every single one of those meetings because I'm on tonight, but that's okay because we do this at 5:30 and it often I'm able to jump back and forth. Okay, so upcoming meetings are March 9th, which will be at the Select Board meeting, March 17th, and April 7th and 21st.
Yep.
Okay. Great. Okay, I think we're coming to the end here. Is there any public comment from the public? Unless it's Heather or the Ledger, I don't see any, so. Let me just make sure that I don't have anybody that I failed to let in. Nope. So any public comment from the committee members?
Very quick comment, if I may.
Yes, sir.
I've mentioned this a couple of times over the period that we've all been together as part of this committee. And I still feel very strongly this way that although we can disagree during a meeting and during discussions, we as a committee have been able to come to a consensus on most matters by the end of the meeting or within a couple of meetings. And it's the best scenario I think we as members could hope for. And I've really enjoyed it. So I thank all of you for being able to, be flexible enough to come up with a consensus. Thank you.
Here, here. I like
Thank you.
Yep, I agree. It's been good working with all you guys and the other members of the community that have participated too, of which there's been many. So it's been a good it's been a good, albeit long, process. But we're getting there. So okay. Anybody else? Michael Ray or Matt?
Yeah, I got to follow up on David Passio's question at the beginning of the meeting. I was incorrect. I had a different bylaw in my mind. So in Res A, Res B, and outlying district, the max building height is 38 feet, and it seems to be 55 in all others.
Oh, okay.
And the village district or architectural preservation district does not supersede that?
I didn't see any specific call out for building height. And as I recall, and I'm kind of embarrassed that I don't know for sure, but I kind of remember the VCD as being an overlay, not hard zoning. So I believe that Res A still exists underneath.
I think that's true.
Okay.
Typically, Matt, that's 2 stories, not quite enough for 3, right?
2.5. I'm not sure as it's written in our bylaw that way, but most of the towns that I see it at 35 or 2.5 stories.
Is it to the ridge or to the midpoint of the ridge, Matt? Do you know?
We're going to drill this down.
It's from the high point of the highest point of grade
Yeah.
to the roof at adjacent to that grade. I believe that's how it's defined.
Okay. You'd be amazed at some of the definitions of building height that I deal with in other towns.
Yeah.
Holy smokes. But anyways.
That's like some of the building I've seen up in New Hampshire with offsets to rivers. They put the foundation 1 inch outside the no touch zone or the no build zone, 1 inch.
Yeah. How to piss off your surveyor 101. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I think we're good, everybody. Thanks, everybody. And we will see you next week.
Okay,
I
we need a roll call.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
I move we-
Second.
Okay. So it's been motioned and seconded. Roll call vote. Matthew Allison,
Aye.
Dave Passios,
Aye.
Michael Ray,
Aye.
and an aye for me. Thank you for keeping me honest, and thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Night,
Thank you.
Heather. Night, everybody.
Good night.